everybody, it is April and I'm in my craft room. Let's make a rag quilt. My friend Diane and I are going to be making rag quilts. I have never made a rag quilt. You would think that, that would probably be one of the first quilts that you make, and Diane's doing it the right way. But I waited until after I had made other quilts before taking on a rag quilt. I will be using cotton fabric and batting. So the way that I do my rag quilt might be a little different from your typical rag quilt, which I believe most of the time is with flannel, and I think that's going to be on my list of things to do as well. So let me show you what we're gonna do. Pardon this interruption for the shameless promotion of my channel. If you like my videos, please give them a thumbs up. If you like crafting tutorials on how to sew, quilt, little projects including cutting machines, paper crafting, and all that good stuff, please consider subscribing to my channel and share it with your friends. Back to our regularly scheduled programming. I have picked out multiple Halloween fabrics and I'm going to cut them into 12.5-inch squares. Then I'm going to cut my batting into 11.5-inch squares. So I've got that 1/2 inch around the edge in order to get my ragging. That's it. Let's get cutting. Here are 2 of the squares that I have cut. So all my squares are cut of my fabric at 12.5 inches. I have all my batting cut at 11.5 inches. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to place the batting on the wrong side of my fabric squares. So I turn my fabric square over, I put my batting down, and I place my other fabric square on the top. The only thing touching the batting should be the wrong sides. And then what you do is you take this square and you sew an X. And I will show you on the sewing machine, but you sew from corner to corner and corner to corner. And that will secure your batting. All right, let's go sew. What you are going to do for your squares, and just like I showed you that I had done to mine, is you are going to sew straight along the middle and make an X. So from corner to corner diagonally on each square, you are going to make an X. Once you have all of your pieces put together, so you've got your 2 pieces of cotton on the outside and your batting on the inside, and you've sewn your X, once they're all sandwiched together, then you need to start making your rows. And you need to be careful. If you're like me, and you don't have one side that is all the same or both sides that are all the same, then you need to be careful to make sure that all of your seams that stick out are on the same side of your row. Because if you don't do that, you will be ripping out stitches. Cut to ripping out stitches. here you go. So what I've done is I've just stacked these on top of each other. I'm not going to have any of this pattern next to each other in my row, but on the other side there will be bits of these that get put together simply because this is what I had the majority of. This is the majority of my fabric. And I knew that that would happen. But since this is my first rag quilt, I was willing to deal with that. So what I've done is I have put these in the order that I'm going to sew them in this row of 7 blocks. You can see that I've made this stack. Now if I flip it over, I can make sure that none of my patterns are touching each other going up and down on the row. And then you'll sew all of those together in a row. So you'll make sure that all of your exposed edges are on one side, and then all of your seams that aren't exposed are on the other side. And this is 2 rows joined together. So essentially what I started doing was I would put 2 and 2 and 2 and 2, and then I would add the 2 and the 2 and the 2 and the 2. But I ended up with some on the back side that are together. So let me see. So I've got one side, none of them are the same in the row. So here I've got all these. Now here, when I stitched 2 together, I got 2 of the same pattern. Again, not a big deal, something I'm willing to live with. And then, so far that row's pretty good. My next row, not so much. Or my next 2 rows. So see on the back, I've got lots of the cobweb fabric together, and that's okay. So then you're going to sew your rows of 7 or your rows of 5, just however you want to do it. And then you're going to put those together. Most important part, make sure that you sew raw edges showing, and then when you sew your next 2, you want to make sure the raw edges are showing on this side. Let's go to the sewing machine and I'll show you how. So this is going to be the side with my exposed edges. Let's see if I can do this right. So I want these 2 together and I want the edges exposed. So I need to sew them like this. And what I've done is I've just sewn a 1/2 inch seam so that I don't quite hit the batting in between my 2 pieces. So I've got these 2, this is exposed. So what I'm going to do to get my next block together is I'm going to pull these 2 like this so that when I'm done sewing, the edge will be exposed. And here you can see that I've got raw edges, raw edges. Where you get into trouble is if you put these 2 together and then you've got a flat seam but raw edges on the rest. And that's where you have to rip out seams. So you want to make sure that you have raw edges showing where you've got raw edges on the rest of your row. So here, raw edge, raw edge, raw edge, raw edge, raw edge, raw edge. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So now let's join these 7 blocks to the other 7 block rows. And this is the same concept, so we want to make sure that the raw edges from this are also raw edges here. So what we're going to do is put these back to back, except my fabric matches there, and if I can just flip it over and get a little difference, then that's what I'm going to do. So when I put these together like this, when I sew it, I see that this will not be a raw edge and this will be a raw edge. So this is how I want to match them. And then this is just like sewing blocks together regularly. I am opening my seams where the blocks meet. All right, so we've got 3 of the 5 rows together, and now I'm going to get the other 2 and put those together. Okay, so again, we want to make sure raw edges are going to come up on the raw edges. So I want to put the sides with the flat seams. Let's see. All right, hold on. He's got raw edges up. I'm going to have my raw edges down on the one side. But up on the other. So these will be sewn together. And here's the raw edge, and I can see the raw edge. So I'm pretty comfortable that I'm sewing them in the correct order. And this is when it gets a little bulky. So I have finished putting my rows together, and this is a good size quilt. So I did 12.5-inch blocks, 5 across and 7 down. This makes a pretty big quilt. And the beauty of a rag quilt is it's quilt as you go. So you do your blocks and then you have your raw edges. And what you do next is you sew the outside. And I am seriously considering putting Chenille-it on it. That, I believe, is my plan. But what I'm going to do on the inside is you've got these raw edges here, and what you want to do is you want to, and Fiskars makes these scissors that are spring loaded, which makes cutting a little easier on the old hands. And you want to take these raw edges and you want to clip them, but you don't want to get to the seam. So you just want a little bitty snip. So you want to take your scissors and you've got your seam. You want to make sure that you don't snip your seam, and you just do little bitty snips, and that is going to make the rag part of your quilt. the spring action makes it easier because you're pushing down instead of, you know, having to push up and down. They just pop right open because of this little spring right here. Here I am trying not to say so and okay, because every single sentence I start is so, okay. So, I have put all my 12.5-inch squares together. I have snipped in between all the squares on the rag side of the quilt, and now I have the outside to finish. And I could have sewn around the outside and snipped, but I thought, you know what would be way more fun? To chenille it. So, I always say so. Let's go chenille it. My plan is to take the Chenille-it, sew a strip on each side of the edge of the quilt. That's it. That's my plan. I am going to put it just off the edge. Gonna back stitch. And let's do this. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to do the binding or the edge just like I would do the binding of any other quilt. So I'm going to back tack. I have stopped where the edge of my quilt is at the 1/4 inch mark. I'm going to break thread. I'm going to pull this out. I'm going to fold it over. Of course, it's on a seam. Isn't that always the way? Then I'm going to fold it over this way, just like I would a regular binding on a quilt. And I'm actually going to put a little clip on this so that I don't lose that while I'm turning it around, because I need to turn it so that I can start sewing that edge. Pull my thread back, put my needle down. I am going to go forward, and then I'm going to back tack. Make sure I get a good strong seam. Okay, so the chenille has been applied to both sides of my project. Now I'm going to wash it. Let's see what happens. Here is my finished quilt. It's kind of big, you know, because I don't start doing things small like I should. I just, you know, do big. Go big or go home. That's my motto. All right. I am very pleased with how it turned out. It's a little late for Halloween. That's okay. Just by a few days. That won't stop me from using it. I'm very pleased with the way the chenille came out on the edge. I think that looks really good. I do need to trim some of the excess fabric, so it's ragged on the edge, but then there's also that chenille, so that I think that gives it a cute edge. My scissors, in trying to fix things where I found that maybe I didn't snip as well as I could, these things, the lock, when you're using them, slides back into place. So I open it, I trim, and I didn't run into this, and now I can't trim because the lock slides forward and locks. So in order to trim, I have to hold this lock in place so it doesn't slide down while I'm trimming and lock. Not pleased. Love Fiskars, not pleased with these. Maybe I'm holding them wrong. Maybe I'm supposed to hold them like this. I don't think so. So, yeah. I don't know that I would recommend these. I'm going to use this ragging again because I thought, you know what would be really cute? I'm going to take one of my fall panels. I'm going to put the batting in the middle and put the backing on. And then I'll free motion quilt it, you know, outlining the truck to give it some puffiness. It just so happens that the fall quilt I'm thinking about has a blue truck on it. And then I'll make squares like this to go around the border on the outside, and I'll attach the border such that there's the rag quilt around the border of the panel, and I think that'll be really cute. So that will be a future video. I don't know how in the future, but it'll be a future video. I've got several things on my list of things to do. Would I recommend a rag quilt? Definitely. And I'm also going to include pictures here where my friend Diane and I did this collab. Diane is way more organized than I am, and I'm going to include some sketches that she has. She actually put together a spreadsheet and labeled her fabrics and then placed them previous to her actually putting the quilt together, put them in a spreadsheet. So she knew exactly what order she wanted them in so that she wouldn't get any squares together. And then her whole backing is the same, whereas my backing is just, again, a hodgepodge of the different fabrics. So I will include that here. And I will include a link to Diane's blog down in the description below in case you want to go check out her blog. She is just now getting into sewing. She got started with the masks, and then she moved on to bowl cozies, however you pronounce that. And then we did this rag quilt together. So this is her first rag quilt, this is mine. And she's actually already started on the second rag quilt, so I think I've got her hooked. Go out, make a rag quilt. They're not hard, and you really, if you have fabric, any fabric at all, you can go ahead, cut it up, throw it together. There are two things. I see a string. There are two things that I will do differently. One of them Diane did, and she did it accidentally. She actually cut her batting to where there was an inch all the way around the edge. That, I believe, is helpful because I don't have as much ragging on this as I would think that I would like, whereas hers has more rag, you know, more of the ragged edges. You have more of a seam allowance, so the way I sew, I wouldn't miss seams like I did on this and have to go back and fix them. And I don't know that I will use batting next time. I may use flannel, so then that isn't even a concern. So those are two things. Cut the batting, if you're going to use the cotton fabric and the batting in between, make sure there's an inch instead of a ½ inch. So for the 12.5 inch square, she cut a 10.5 inch square of batting, and I think it worked out better. And then if you don't want to use the batting, I think flannel is a good option. I don't know the cost between, like if batting is less expensive and flannel is more expensive. I got my backing for my wall at $2.99 a yard. So yeah, I'm not real sure. I buy my batting in bulk, and I'm not really sure what it equates to at a yard cost. So, but just a couple things to consider. Thank you for watching. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it and it was helpful. If you'd like to see more videos like this, including sewing and paper crafting, please subscribe to my channel. Have a great day, eat some chocolate, and be kind to everybody. Until next time, bye. Hi everybody. Put on my microphone. Let's make a rag quilt. So let's go to the sewing machine. You see, I hate doing the endings.